You're technically done with your song for real now, but suppose you want to spice up your song even more. What can we do, you might ask? Well, you can add parts in the background behind the melodies.
The easiest way to fill up the mid-frequencies of a song is by introducing rhythmic material. Usually based on the chord tones, these rhythmic materials come in many forms, such as arpeggios, or strummed chords. The type of rhythmic material you should use also depends on the mood of the song that you want to convey. For example, arpeggios are more commonly used in light feeling sections. As always, feel free to experiment until you get a good rhythmic material that fits your particular song.
Similarly, you might have background elements that are simply ambient, strumming sounds that play every measure or so. More specifically, these would go on one of the strong beats. Good instruments for this type of background element include synth pads and tubular bells. Whereas the previous type of rhythmic material would occupy the mid-range, these ambient sounds occupy a high frequency range, often even higher than the melody itself. A common method to fill up the moderately high frequencies is to introduce an instrument that plays a short looping riff in the background. These riffs should not be fighting too much with the main melody, since they are in around the same frequency range. In fact, these riffs are barely noticeable in the final version of the song, but their presence still makes all the difference. Background parts that are around this speed, that is, 2 notes per beat, are often simply arpeggiated versions of the underlying chord progression. Super Mario's theme is a particularly popular example that's more on the complex side. You can also have rolling notes in the background that play even faster, about 4 notes per beat. Acoustic piano is the most popular choice for playing these faster riffs. You may want to use vibraphones or harps instead if these rolling notes are meant to stay in the background. If the range of the spam is narrow, you can opt to use electric pianos or harpsichords. These background rolls are often called note spam. Other names for it include piano spam or crazy piano, since they're often played with a piano. Even though it's colloquially called spam, it's not actually supposed to be as chaotic or random as the word makes them out to be. It's also very much a welcome thing. One last note, the kind of melodic accompaniment we're talking about here is meant to be more on the simple side in general. The more complex you make your accompaniment, the more like counterpoint your accompaniment becomes, and the more equal in presence to melody you would want to allow it to be. If you're having trouble coming up with something to add as a new layer to a particular section, you can try reusing material that you have already introduced in the earlier part of the song as motifs. For example, in Touhou 6 Stage 1, the motif introduced here can be heard here, being accompanied by the main melody. Another example is Touhou 15 Stage 4, where the motif of the song is reintroduced 35 seconds into the song. This is a technique often used by Zoom, especially in stage themes. A good way to utilize this technique is by creating a riff in the intro and then copy-pasting the entire riff into the next section. This method usually works quite well, though you will often encounter clashes in the rhythm or the notes between the motif and the melody if you just try to insert the motif as is. That's to be expected. Just like a melody won't magically harmonize with itself when it's simply copy-pasted and transposed by any interval. The same applies here. Try changing the motif notes based on the chord progression of the melody section. and decide on whether to utilize this technique or not, based on its workability.
Most importantly, remember that too many unique sections as they stand individually will only impede on the memorability of each part. That's bad for your song. That's why setting a motif is important, especially in longer songs. Of course, you should just avoid writing a song to be long in general, since quality vastly trumps quantity when it comes to Touhou-style composing.
Take a final boss or extra stage boss theme for example. They are usually the longest lasting song in a soundtrack, at around 3 minutes to 3 minutes 15 seconds in length. However, the amount of unique content in such a song only actually adds up to around 2.5 minutes at most. That's about a full minute or so worth of reused content.
But on the off chance that you're required to drag a song out for whatever reason, having a sense of unity will ultimately be your saving grace. As a bonus, setting a motif early on also allows you to work with it as a base for coming up with later melodies during the composition process.
Okay, so you know how you should be careful with which notes you use over a chord in order to prevent the song from becoming too dissonant? Well, the same principle applies to any additional lines that you decide to add. That means your accompaniment needs to harmonize with both your main melody and your chords. Now, you might be thinking, wait, that seems like so many things to keep track of. Well, yeah, it is, but it's just something that you're going to have to get used to. I'll let you in on a secret though. As long as it doesn't sound too dissonant, nobody cares. You're not writing a theory exam here. Nobody's marking you down for improper harmony. As long as it sounds consonant enough, you should be fine.
Generally, the less melodic and the more out of the way your background element is, the less you have to worry about it not harmonizing with the melody, though you still need to worry about harmonizing it with the chords. For example, you almost don't have to worry about harmonizing the melody with Rhythmic Material, unless you made it unusually attention-grabbing for some reason. But you still have to put in a lot of care when reusing a motif because it's basically counterpoint at that point, except we didn't feel like introducing counterpoint in this video. If you want a quick way to gauge how proper the harmonization between two notes is, refer to the harmonization checklist from last episode. The lower down the list the relationship is, the less properly the two notes harmonize. Though again, remember that just because your harmony is improper doesn't mean it can't work. It just means it's harder to make sound consonant. If your thing is just teetering on the edge of too dissonant though, there are ways to mask the dissonance through arranging.
When we mean hiding, we mean making the dissonance less noticeable than before. The best way is to change up your composition to remove those sneaky dissonances. But if you are unwilling or unable to, you can adopt the following methods. Firstly, if you haven't already, you can try spacing out your frequencies. This means to allocate your melody, chords, bass, etc. to different octaves. To achieve a better melody, you will inevitably utilize non-chord tones in your melodies. However, when this melody is placed in the same range as your chords, these non-chord tones will clash with the chord progressions. Spacing out your melodies helps to reduce the dissonances between them. Similarly, if your chords sound dissonant, try playing around with inversions in an attempt to reduce the dissonances. A D major 7th chord in this order will sound more dissonant than. If that doesn't help much and you don't wish to alter your composition that much, you can first try identifying the notes that are causing the dissonances, and then reducing the velocity of those notes to make it less obvious. For example, in an attempt to counterpoint the song motif with the main melody of Electric World, there are some clashes with the motif and the melody. Altering the motif will disrupt the flow of it, so the best solution here is to reduce the velocity of the notes causing the dissonances. Unless it's super obvious or your listener has super ears, you do not have to worry about the small details like these. Human beings usually listen to a song as a whole instead of focusing on every single aspect. The choice of instrument will also affect how noticeable the dissonances are. In the previous examples, incense cone is used for the motif. As incense cone naturally sounds abnormal, your listener might just think the dissonance is the sound of the synth instead of your actual composition. That said, it really depends on how dissonant your composition is. If it is super obviously dissonant, then I highly recommend you to alter the composition. If not, you can try adopting the above methods and shrug the dissonances off.
Congratulations, you have finished stage 1. By now, we should have taught you everything that you need to know to start composing your first song. In my opinion, the best way to get good at music is just through experience. Once you've composed for long enough, you start to develop an intuition for stuff which is a lot harder to explain through text. So with that said, we encourage you to pick up your DAW and start composing. Remember, you don't need to wait for your 13GB VST to download or your SD90 to arrive in the mail. Arranging can come later. Right now, you just need to develop some good compositional skills. If your composition sucks, fancy instruments aren't going to save you. A good way to motivate yourself is to compose for a project, such as an album or fan game. By tying each song to a pre-existing scenario, you'll be forced to do something new and unique for each song. Even if the project itself crashes and burns, at least you'll have gained some valuable experience from composing, and possibly some songs that you can upload to your channel. In stage 2, we'll cover topics and techniques that, while cool, aren't absolutely necessary to know in order to make a good song. Until then, good luck composing and get to it!